So now that we're finally almost done with 2016, are you relieved to be done with this year? Or when you think of 2016 in general, what comes to mind?
You know, 2016 really was a mix between substantial challenges and incredible opportunities. I think on the whole, I would describe it as a challenge. And I think it really was a challenge for everyone. Obviously, the predominant story throughout 2016 was the fact that we were faced with a deeper, a more protracted recession, deeper than in recent Alberta history. And that obviously had real life consequences for our community. We had one of the highest unemployment rates that we've experienced. We experienced population loss for the first time in our lifetime, and we experienced business losses. But there was also glimmers of hope and opportunities throughout 2016 as well that are important to highlight.
Such as?
Well, I think one of the greatest opportunities that we had in 2016 was, of course, the 2016 MasterCard Memorial Cup. And the Memorial Cup was important to us for so many reasons. Not only did it showcase Red Deer nationally and internationally, it also positioned us for future sports tourism opportunities in terms of the caliber of event that Red Deer put on and how that has positioned us to attract future opportunities similar to that. But it also meant $14 million of economic spin-off for our community at a time where we desperately needed it. And the sense of community pride that came out of supporting our hometown team in the Red Deer Rebels and in supporting the entire Memorial Cup 10 days span, but also the support that we gave to the victims of the Fort McMurray wildfire in terms of proceeds from that event. I think all around that was an absolute highlight in 2016. From a city operations perspective, of course, 2016 marked the adoption of the Riverlands Area Redevelopment Plan. That is a plan that has been 20 years in the making. And so the fact that now that we have roadway access and servicing access and the power lines buried, and the fact that we actually adopted that plan means that we can finally see that vision come to pass and bring those lands to market. Another key area, which I think is important in terms of 2016, but what went under the radar a little bit, was the actual adoption of new servicing directions and the approval of the North of 11A area structure plan. That plan actually means that Red Deer, in terms of where we grow and develop, will change. In that we're growing further north to north of 11A. And so that's one of the, I think, the strategic things of the past year. And then, of course, crime and public safety were top of mind in 2016. And so in the latter part of 2016, we adopted a community safety plan that says we need to focus not just on enforcement, but that we need to focus on crime prevention initiatives in intervention for at-risk individuals as well as enforcement.
We definitely will circle back to some of those developments that you mentioned, but I do want to pick up on the crime and safety aspect, because that's something I know we in our newsroom hear quite a bit about. And even just last week we talked to, well, Councillor Harris and some other local business owners that they want to see more done with being proactive in terms of addressing crime in the downtown areas and that kind of thing. Obviously you guys are taking it seriously, and it sounds like you guys have some big plans moving forward to try to address that kind of thing.
Crime and public safety, when we do our annual citizen surveys and feedback, crime and public safety always hovers in the top 3. But in 2016, crime and public safety very clearly became the #1 priority for Red Deerians. And so we obviously have a responsibility and imperative to respond to that. This year, so last year was when we actually, for the first time in Red Deer's history, adopted our local annual policing plan to determine local service levels and priorities for policing. One of our focus areas in that was to reduce persons crime. And so we did see gains in terms of our focus on organized crime. In particular, there were some very high profile arrests and one of the first civil seizures actually in Alberta history. So we did make progress in terms of the areas that we prioritized. And then we established Project Pinpoint, which focuses on prolific offenders. I will say, though, that the one area that we will identify and have identified for 2017 is the fact that as much as we've seen some stabilization on persons crime. And I use that word reluctantly because obviously no crime's better, but at least we've stabilized it somewhat and now can focus on reductions. Where we've seen the substantial increases that's unacceptable is in property crime. And that is an area of huge concern for our businesses and our public. And so as we move into 2017, we have a new chief of police. Our council has met with that chief of police and said we absolutely need to get a handle around the property crime. We know that it's an Alberta-wide problem, likely in relationship to the economy. But regardless of that, we're not just going to wait for the economy to improve and hope that property crime improves. We absolutely need to focus more on enforcement efforts on that front so that we can respond to those concerns of our public.
And that's good to hear because, like I say, in the people that call and talk to us on the stories that we do and stuff like that, they want to see something done. They want to make sure that it's not just being written off as a provincial issue. So from what you're saying, the city definitely taking it seriously. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, obviously there's dynamics that are occurring because of the economy. But I think the public wants to see responsiveness to that. And so what we've been endeavoring to do, previously our policing model, it was a reactive policing model. So police would only do calls for service if a call came in. And there were some areas that they weren't even didn't have the resources to respond to. What we've done is adopted a philosophical shift that's saying, no, we need proactive policing. That doesn't mean you don't just have to wait for the call to come in. And obviously our public is concerned because, as much as our past focus was on reducing persons crime, that's where real life and death impact are. Property crime also has an impact on people because once people are victimized, that affects how they engage in community life. And so I can give every reassurance that Council's priority now and heading into the new year is certainly in responding to that.
So you go from a operating and, I guess, community priority to what continues to be one of your top capital priorities in the courthouse. And it sure would be nice, I guess, to hear sooner than later, one way or another, from the province as to what we could hopefully do here in Red Deer regarding courthouse space.
Some of we did have some substantial advocacy successes with the provincial government in 2016. One of the main ones was, of course, receiving the funding for the Red Deer Regional Airport expansion and the QE2 South interchange. That was a long-standing public safety concern because of that traffic weave. It was one of the most unsafe interchanges in the province. So we're very grateful for that. One area, though, that is 5 years we've been waiting for response is with respect to expanded capacity for the Red Deer Regional Courthouse. And this is important for a couple of reasons. Obviously, we're holding municipal land in abeyance, so there's a real financial impact to the taxpayer in terms of having that land sit vacantly. But I will say the most important reason is that this year there was a precedential court decision, it was the Jordan decision, which basically says that courts need to deal with cases within a certain time frame. Otherwise, those charges are stayed. As a community and as a regional service provider, if we're enforcing crime in our community, but those cases are being thrown out of court because of stays, because of delays in the justice system, obviously the left hand and the right hand aren't working together. And in coming back to the point that Red Deerians have made around crime and public safety being their #1 concern, we need expanded courthouse capacity in order to ensure that when charges are laid, that those charges are upheld.
Obviously, you guys are banging down the doors of the province to try and get that message across, along with a number of other advocacy priorities. In addition to courthouse, what are some of the other things that you would like to see the province address that would benefit Red Deer in the area? So
in addition to the courthouse, a couple of the other areas that we have been pursuing and that we will have an ask is right now Council has a shelter study underway. We recognize that there are some gaps in terms of space allocations for shelter and some of the support services pertaining to vulnerable citizens. So once that plan comes forward, we will have an ask before the provincial government saying, as the 3rd largest city, as a regional hub city, central on the QE2, we need responsiveness, not just for the vulnerable citizens in our community and region, but also in terms of just the impacts that having gaps in service has on the community overall. So that's a substantial ask that we have in addition to Courthouse. Another area that we are focusing on with the provincial government is in terms of the proposed Polytechnic University status for Red Deer College. This is strategic for us on a number of fronts. As I mentioned, for the first time in our lifetime, we lost some population this year. That obviously is a consequence of the economy. But business and population loss is not acceptable for the dynamic community that we are. And Polytechnic University is a strategic way that we'll not only be able to keep our population, but actually attract population from our region as well. And our hope is that we'll close the inequity right now between advanced education service in Alberta and secure that Poly U status for Red Deer College in the lead up to the Games and as a legacy of the Games as well.